I'm very happy to talk about the current new revised edition of the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. And what little I could understand of the previous talk is that you concentrated on the practical issues, and now we're going back to the more general level, to the principle level that the European Code of Conduct represents. So first, I will say a few words about what the Code of Conduct, usually known as ECOC these days, means, what the purpose of it is, and then second half concentrate on a few issues for discussion. So what do we need to remember about the European Code of Conduct is that it applies to all disciplines. It's non-punitive in approach. In other words, it concentrates on good and responsible research practices, and towards the end it also describes what violates these good research practices, which are known as misconduct, the fabrication, falsification, plagiarism is known as the big sins in academia, and then the other unacceptable practices. So what is ECOC then? It's a description of fair and responsible research behavior, I would say. How the research community, its institutions, its funders, even those who decide for the funding formula should adhere to. So it's based on such fundamental principles as reliability, honesty, respect, which I think is very important, respect for your colleagues, and accountability. In other words, research accountability is not just ticking the box. It's a process. You have to discuss ethics and ethics issues in a project from its idea to its publication. Throughout, it should be in the minds of those involved in the research. So it applies to the whole research community, from individual researchers, research leaders, institutions, funders, so on. And it is a framework document. It is an ALLEA document. It comes from the all European academies and has been the different drafts have gone through the process of approval. The final approval came from the ALLEA board. So it is, from ALLEA's point of view, it's a recommendation, and it's based on self-regulation. In other words, the idea is that the research community corrects and monitors its own behavior. But it has another status too, because it has been adopted by the European Commission as a legal document that needs to be complied with by those who receive EU research funding. As a framework document, obviously, it needs to be applied and adapted to suit specific disciplines or specific context. So the crucial question for anybody who uses it and looks at it is the question of what does ECOC mean in our case? At national level, I understand that the Estonian National Code is based on the 2017 version of this code. But it also applies at institutional project levels. What do we need to do in order to be able to comply with the ideas, with the principles expressed in the code? So what has happened since the previous version, the 2017 version? There have been many EU projects on research integrity and research ethics. So there are plenty of results that are useful for different purposes. There are many practical tools available for implementation. I mentioned just one project that was finished last year or this spring. It's called as SOPs for RI Toolbox. I don't like the name; it's complicated, but it's a kind of a big toolbox full of checklists for different actors in the research community. In the current new version, there's much more emphasis on improving the research culture and research environments. So you could say that the focus has shifted from the individual researcher to the whole system, so that in order to avoid counterproductive incentives, particularly in funding decisions and funding formulae. So in practice, I think we need a garage full of RI tools, both soft and normative, depending on the context, for the policymakers, funders, for the administration of research funding, for specific disciplines, individual researchers, research groups, and reviewers of research proposals, and publishers of research outputs. There's very many new demands or more pronounced demands in the new code, new version. What is typical of these research integrity tools suggested is that they different research integrity guidelines target at different levels of concreteness, but they are compatible with each other. The kind of layered codes that hopefully will lead to a kind of harmonization in ethical thinking, in not normative uniformity, that's not the purpose, but practical and solid implementations in different contexts and national levels, institutional levels, and so on. And I think that these tools can also help decision makers to design what I would call healthy financial incentives. Funding criteria based on collaboration, respect, quality, and understanding of what research and innovation are about. I always like to quote this from Simon Singh's book, Big Bang. So the French Academy of Science in Paris was set up so that scientists could pursue independent research, free from having to pander to the whims of kings, queens, or popes. And I think that is still the idea behind academic freedom. But as I said, no, the principles are the same. We didn't touch the principles. So the key message is that in a research community, focus on good and responsible research practices, good behavior, and creating a favorable mindset towards research integrity. Training in the principles of reliability, honesty, respect, and accountability. And this training needs to be not only a one-off training. I think it needs to for young researchers, for senior researchers, for the institution of what sort of procedures they should have in place. Because I think the most critical realization in the research community is to realize that integrity is a sine qua non in research, and also an essential part of the quality assurance in research performing organizations. And I think this aspect has to a large extent been neglected in this very competitive, cutthroat environment these days. Now I come to the questions. Issues that is self-regulation more binding than a legal requirement? Because in some countries the codes are based on law, in some countries on self-regulation. And I think that in a certain sense, self-regulation puts tougher expectations for researchers than if behavior is ruled by law. Because breaches or violations of research integrity or good behavior are a continuum, from clear misconduct cases to unacceptable behavior, unacceptable treatment of your colleagues, and so on. So self-regulation is more a matter of values, of conscience, right or wrong, fair, unfair, and so on. So in a sense, this code of conduct is meant to create an ethical mindset and promote ethical vigilance. So, in other words, bad or dishonest research does not advance our knowledge and understanding of the world. Research integrity and research ethics is always a question. There are many opinions about the definitions of research integrity. Is research integrity part of research ethics or vice versa? So, but I think in practice, these closely connected concepts are treated so that research integrity focuses on describing honest and respectful behavior, individual and collective in all disciplines. And then research ethics include the field-specific ethical norms, so legal norms and regulations, such as they exist in medical ethics, bioethics, and so on. An important part of the research integrity process are the ethical reviews. So reviews before the fact, so to say. It's part of a research process to ask for an ethical review. These exist at institutional levels or local levels. And in a certain sense, they are a kind of insurance for the researchers. The GDPR has put many more new duties and restrictions on how to use data. So it's good if they are discussed before the research starts, really, or before critical areas of the research, so that the researchers have the backing of the ethical committee, or have, on the basis of what the ethical review committees say, have commented on them. And then these days, these ethical review committees, ethical committees are not only needed in medicine and medical areas, but also in many SSH areas, in social sciences, also in humanities. So because of the mainly because of the vulnerable groups, elderly, children, because of data use, reuse of data. So it's good that these discussions are dealt with before the research starts. So that's the idea. It saves you from many problems. Well, then we can answer, does self-regulation work? And I've answered this question before. Yes, but, and no. So I'll take here the no examples that we know from practice, and in my case, practice in Finland very often. Unacceptable practices are applied as customary practice in academic contexts, so that non-deserving authors to articles are added to funding applications to improve the academic standing of the non-deserving, or vice versa, to add somebody with a good reputation or well-known researcher to the application in order to impress the reviewers. Authorship issues in general, ghostwriting, And then unreported cases. There are many rumors about because that there are unhealthy practices in the system, but nobody says anything because temporary contracts shut up mouths. There are authoritarian, over-ambitious leaders who shut up mouths. They say that, well, extend your contract if you take this up. Collegial practices, cronyism, institutional cover-ups even, although a national system has helped there. And then from another angle these days, unsupportive leadership at institutions that leaves the researchers alone, because social media targeting these days is if you have a sensitive study subject, they get so much hate mail. So the institutions behind the researchers. So what is still needed to promote responsible conduct of research? So I think these individual characteristics of good behavior need to be extended to collective consciences, institutions, so funders, policymakers. Institutional responsibilities have to take into account training and guidelines, good examples, clear procedures and discussions, and so on. In the end, the question is, I think, that why would any serious researcher want to invest in breaking the internalized rules of what proper conduct of research, or producing fake news, or why would they take that risk and lose the respect and their reputation among the colleagues? One area that still needs a lot of working, I think, is responsible research and innovation. What has come up with this in these many projects that have also included innovation is the thinking that if it's technologically feasible, it will be done, and we'll think of ethics afterwards. And this is I was just at a conference where there's a lot of emphasis on the fact that ethics should be included in thinking and discussion processes from the beginning. In order for them to set in, so ethics is an integral part of any research process, not something to be added afterwards. The good news is, I think, that there's a paradigm change in the making in Europe as the reassessment of the indicators used for research performance, and the coalition for advancing research assessment is a real progress, and as both the institutions, universities, funders, research associations, all promoting it and trying to get back on track in a sense, to find out what research really entails. It's not only quantitative results, but basically it's a qualitative judgment for which peer review is central, supported by responsible use of quantitative indicators, and that's, I think, would help research integrity and following and the good practices much more easy. So to summarize, what does ECOC mean in practice? To create a mindset favorable to research integrity, to get rid of the tick the box mentality, to inspire discussions, to recommend application of adequate tools for implementation, to recommend ongoing training for different target groups, to emphasize institutional responsibilities, to provide ethical review bodies, and to focus on non-punitive approaches, to focus on best practices instead of sanctions. And the final slide. We can ask ourselves, is ECOC an influential code? What makes it an influential code is that it has this EU legal backing. The legacy of the 2017 edition is very wide. It's because it has been applied in many national codes. But it's still only a framework code that needs to be applied in an adequate fashion. And any code needs to be internalized before it becomes powerful. And I think this is a process that still needs to be emphasized. When we did the update of the earlier code, this revision process was closely followed by stakeholders who gave this time very detailed feedback and relevant comments, and we tried to take them into account, but remain at the principle level. And we also gave detailed feedback to stakeholders about the decisions we made in the drafting group. And so in a sense, you could say, to summarize what ECOC is, that it's a summary of collective thought processes, a shared vision among stakeholders. So thank you very much. I hope you got most of it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's try to have a small Q&A also, if we have this connection between you. Yeah, kas keegi soovib give a hand if anybody have a question here? Yeah, we have one here.
Hi, thank you. You had on one slide, you said that what we need to do is to, what was it? Enlarge individual characteristics onto institutions and procedures and practices. And would you care to elaborate? Is that a sort of a virtue ethical approach, or what do you mean by this? Thanks.
Yeah, what I mean is that I think institutions need to understand, the leadership needs to understand that they need to promote good practice. Not for example, not to insist on a number of publications per year, because that doesn't make sense, because research takes time. Not to assess researchers on the basis of quantitative indicators only, and advise against predatory publishers, predatory conferences, and give good incentives, agree with the researchers of what the aims of the research are, and that type of thing. And also, I think it's very important, if there is no national system of how to deal, what sort of procedures to use when there is an allegation of misconduct. So so that everybody knows how allegations will be treated, because we're still presuming that the people are innocent until they're proven guilty. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Krista Varantola, thank you. Thank you for your time and for your presentation.